Would you go back and look over the comic books and those who read them, and you saw places where you felt like you can really expand the story? What can people who've read the books, what can they look forward to as certain points that will be expanded and can be even fleshed out even more?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I don't know. Can you think of something?
Well, I mean, truthfully, it's
You'll notice certain things
yeah.
from the comic book that you'll go, oh, I know exactly where I am in Kirkman's story. You know, getting out of the hospital and seeing the dead woman in the park, the first zombie he sees. I mean, those sort of iconic Kirkman scenes are definitely in there. But there's Morgan becomes a much bigger deal in the pilot, for example. You know, they have a nice meeting and they kind of take care of him and then they move on. I brought a whole idea of why Morgan hasn't left and isn't leaving yet.
Yeah.
That kind of roots it in a much more dramatic and painfully emotional thing. You know, it's that kind of stuff. When I see that opportunity of, I want to know more about this guy, and then a storyline suggests itself, I work it in. Please, I interrupt you.
No, not at all. But what's interesting for me is, you know, when the graphic novel first came out, I was shooting in Austin, and I don't remember what show it was, with Robert Rodriguez, and I went to Austin Comics, and it was there, and I remember buying 2 issues, and I went back, and I'm like, dude, look, a comic book about zombies, and we were so excited, and he and I always talk about zombie stuff, so I read, you know, I got pretty deep into it, and then I hadn't reread it, so then Frank and I, over the last couple of years, have been talking about the show, and I purposely didn't reread the graphic novel, so when I read the first draft of the script, the slight divergences that Frank took, I didn't remember if it was like that in the graphic novel or not, because it was so true to the form that there were a couple, like, you know, there was a scene with a couple characters, and I was like, I don't remember those guys. And then when I found out that they weren't in the graphic novel, but they're in the show, I didn't even remember, because it made so much sense, and it was so obvious to me that like Frank had said earlier, it's like if Robert probably would have went back and thought about it a little more. It's like Steve King talking about the ending of The Mist thing. I would have ended it that way if I would have thought of it. You know, Kirkman may have thought of some of these divergences if he would have, you know, spent a little more time or gone back and reinvested in that character and said, oh, you know, I'll bet Glenn would have done this, or I'll bet Rick would have done that, you know.
And he has done that with some of his characters.
Yeah.
You know, he has definitely, he's taken his own detours, which I think is fascinating.
Which, again, is why this is such a brilliant concept for a TV show, because you can't take characters over here, and this guy goes over here, and then, you know, 6, 7 episodes later, it's like they come back, or you find out why they went off, or what happened to them, or, you know, so it's such a rich landscape that you can go anywhere, and, you know, I mean, if anybody can write it.
Well, what's funny, what he just said about going back and reading the graphic novel, I did the same thing, because it had been like a year or 2 or whatever, and we're greenlit, and I'm going. I just wanted to go back to the first part of the graphic novel to make sure I hadn't missed anything. And I was frankly curious, because it was now very far away from my head, because I've been working with the script. And it even happened to me. I read Kirkman's comic book and I went, oh, that's not in the comic book.
So sorry, guys, we have to get up and go. We have